Snow fell in a tranquil hush over Winter Haven, a quaint Vermont town nestled in the arms of frosted pines and rolling hills. Each flake seemed to carry whispers of the past, blanketing the streets in a stillness that felt both soothing and eerie. Amid the gentle chaos of holiday shoppers and flickering Christmas lights, a lone figure moved, silent, mysterious, and oddly captivating. Bowie, a scruffy mutt with mismatched eyes, one a crystalline blue, the other a deep, earthy brown, drifted through the town's snowy streets like a ghost. No one knew where he came from, but he had become a peculiar fixture in Winter Haven. Children would gasp at his striking gaze. Adults murmured about his odd habits, like lingering near the fire station or staring intently at the forest's edge. Yet no one claimed him, and Bowie never stayed in one place long. This Christmas Eve was different. Evelyn Parker, a 16-year-old whose life had unraveled exactly 1 year ago, watched Bowie from her frosted window. Her heart was heavy, and her grief felt as unyielding as the winter chill. Last Christmas Eve, her father, a brave firefighter, had perished in a blaze that destroyed the town's oldest building. The tragedy had left a scar not just on the Parkers but on the town itself, one that even the festive lights couldn't conceal. Wrapped in a thick sweater, Evelyn leaned closer to the glass, her breath fogging the pain. Bowie stood still in the snow, his piercing eyes locked on her. It wasn't the first time she had seen him, but tonight felt different. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her shiver, not from the cold, but from a strange, inexplicable connection. "Mom," Evelyn called softly, her voice barely carrying through the quiet house. "That dog. He's here again." Her mother, Maria Parker, looked up from the kitchen table where she had been sorting through a pile of old mail. Letters had been arriving lately, cryptic and unsettling, addressed in shaky handwriting. Maria dismissed them as the work of an eccentric, but they only deepened Evelyn's unease. "Probably just looking for food," Maria replied without much interest. "Don't encourage him, Evie. He'll never leave." But Evelyn couldn't turn away. Ignoring her mother's warning, she grabbed a scarf and stepped outside. The cold bit at her cheeks as she approached Bowie, who remained rooted in place. His eyes, so different yet so aligned, seemed to study her as though he had been waiting. "Hey there," she whispered, crouching to his level. Bowie didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head, his expression almost human in its curiosity. Evelyn reached out tentatively, but before her fingers brushed his fur, he turned and began to walk away. "Wait," Evelyn called, but Bowie didn't stop. Something about his gait, deliberate, almost purposeful, compelled her to follow. Through the dim streets, past wreath-adorned lampposts and glowing windows, Bowie led her toward the edge of town, where the forest loomed like a wall of secrets. "Where are you taking me?" Evelyn muttered under her breath, her boots crunching in the snow. She paused at the forest's edge, her breath visible in the frigid air. Bowie stopped too, turning to look at her as if asking, "Do you trust me?" Evelyn hesitated. Her father had often taken her hiking in these woods, pointing out constellations through the gaps in the trees or teaching her to listen for the rustle of deer. Now, the forest seemed foreign, cloaked in an almost supernatural stillness. "Fine," she said, taking a tentative step forward. "But if I freeze out here, it's your fault." Bowie's ears perked up, and he continued into the trees, his paws leaving faint imprints in the snow. Evelyn followed, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and intrigue. The deeper they ventured, the darker the woods became, the faint glow of the town receding behind them. After what felt like an eternity, Bowie stopped abruptly. He began pawing at the ground, scattering snow and revealing a patch of frozen earth. Evelyn crouched beside him, brushing away the frost with gloved hands. There was nothing there, just dirt and roots. She frowned. "What is it, boy?" she asked. But Bowie only whimpered softly, his mismatched eyes flicking between her and the ground. Evelyn stood, brushing snow from her knees. "I don't understand." As if sensing her confusion, Bowie barked, a sharp, commanding sound that echoed through the trees. Evelyn startled, her pulse quickening. She turned back toward the way they had come, the darkness suddenly feeling oppressive. But Bowie stood firm, his gaze unwavering. Reluctantly, Evelyn turned to leave. Bowie followed her back to the edge of the forest, where the first lights of Winter Haven flickered into view. Before she could say anything, he trotted off, vanishing into the snowy night as silently as he had appeared. Back home, Evelyn found her mother pacing by the window. "Where were you?" Maria demanded, her tone sharp with worry. "In the woods," Evelyn admitted. "The dog. Bowie. He took me there." Maria's face paled. "The woods?" "Evelyn, you know how dangerous it is out there, especially in the dark." "I was fine," Evelyn replied. "But, Mom," he was digging at something, like he wanted me to find it. "Enough about that dog," Maria snapped, her voice uncharacteristically harsh. "He's just a stray. Forget about him." But Evelyn couldn't forget. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the faint glow of Christmas lights outside her window, her mind raced. Why had Bowie brought her to the forest? What was he trying to tell her? And why, when she closed her eyes, could she still see his mismatched gaze, haunting and strangely familiar, as though he carried a truth she wasn't ready to face? The days following Evelyn's strange journey into the forest blurred together in a haze of curiosity and unease. Bowie appeared outside her house every morning, his mismatched eyes fixed on her as if urging her to follow him again. Evelyn, however, hesitated. Something about the woods, about Bowie's persistence, sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't fear, exactly, but a sense of something just beyond her understanding. Her mother, Maria, grew more withdrawn with each passing day. The cryptic letters kept arriving, always unsigned, their content veiled in warnings that left Evelyn with more questions than answers. One read, "Not everything burns to ashes. Some truths remain buried." Another simply said, "He wasn't supposed to be there." Maria brushed them off as the work of a prankster, but Evelyn wasn't so sure. There was a weight to the words, a gravity that echoed the hollow feeling in her chest when she thought of her father. Bowie, for his part, seemed to sense her restlessness. He lingered closer now, his presence a quiet but constant reminder of the mysteries surrounding her. One snowy afternoon, Evelyn decided she'd had enough of her mother's evasions. She needed answers. "Mom," she began hesitantly, standing in the kitchen where Maria was peeling potatoes for dinner. "The letters. They're about Dad, aren't they?" Maria stiffened, the knife pausing mid-slice. "I told you, they're nothing. Just someone being cruel. But why would someone send them now? Why not last year?" Evelyn pressed. "And why do they keep mentioning the fire?" Maria's hand trembled, the blade clattering against the cutting board. "Evelyn, please, let it go. Let it go." Evelyn's voice cracked. "How can I, when no one will tell me the truth? Dad didn't just die, Mom. He was a hero, but—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "But what if it wasn't an accident?" Maria turned away, her shoulders shaking. "Your father. He always said some things were better left in the past. I think this is one of them." Frustrated and heartbroken, Evelyn stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. Bowie was waiting on the porch, his breath visible in the icy air. For a moment, Evelyn simply stared at him, her emotions a tempest inside her. Then, without a word, she started walking. Bowie followed. The path to the forest was eerily familiar, and Evelyn's thoughts churned as she trudged through the snow. Why was Bowie so determined to lead her there? What did he want her to find? And why did her mother refuse to speak about the fire? Questions piled upon questions, their weight almost suffocating. This time, Bowie led her deeper into the woods. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath her boots and the occasional creak of ice-laden branches. Evelyn felt the chill seep into her bones, but she pressed on, driven by a mixture of dread and determination. Bowie stopped suddenly, his ears pricked and his body tense. He began digging again, his paws scattering snow with urgency. Evelyn knelt beside him, her breath fogging the air as she clawed at the frozen ground. This time, she found something. A small, rusted tin box, half buried in the earth. Her fingers shook as she pried it open. Inside were old photographs, yellowed with age. The first showed a group of men in firefighter uniforms, laughing together in front of a fire truck. Her father was among them, his arms slung around the shoulders of a younger man Evelyn didn't recognize. There was something warm and familiar about the camaraderie captured in the image, but it made her chest ache. Beneath the photos was a folded piece of paper. Evelyn unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the handwritten words. It was a letter, addressed to her father. John, I found something in the building, blueprints, documents. This project isn't what it seems. Meet me at the station tonight, but come alone. We can't let this get out until we're sure. R. Evelyn's heart raced. What had her father been investigating? And who was R? She turned to Bowie, who was watching her intently, his tail wagging slightly as if to say, "You're on the right track." The next day, Evelyn decided to visit the town library. Winterhaven's history was tucked away in the dusty archives, and she spent hours sifting through old newspapers and town records. It was there she discovered the name attached to the building her father had died in, Whitaker and Sons Restoration. Whitaker. The name struck a chord. Mr. Whitaker, the elderly man who lived 2 streets over, had always been kind to her family, often stopping by to share stories about Winterhaven's past. Could he be connected to the fire, or was it just a coincidence? Evelyn decided to find out. That evening, she bundled up and made her way to Mr. Whitaker's home. Bowie followed close behind, his presence a comforting shadow. The old man greeted her with a surprised smile, ushering her inside with a warmth that didn't quite match the icy air of her suspicions. "What brings you here, Evelyn?" he asked, settling into an armchair. "I've been looking into the fire," Evelyn said cautiously, her eyes searching his face for any sign of recognition. "I found some old photos and a letter. It mentioned blueprints, something about the building not being what it seemed." Mr. Whitaker's smile faded, replaced by a solemn expression. He leaned back, his hands clasped tightly. "Your father was a good man. Too good, perhaps. He always believed in doing the right thing, even when it wasn't easy." "What do you mean?" Evelyn pressed. Whitaker sighed. "That building, it was part of a restoration project. A group of us wanted to preserve it, but not everyone had good intentions. Your father stumbled onto something. Fraud, corruption. He tried to expose it, but someone made sure he couldn't." Evelyn felt her breath catch. "You're saying someone caused the fire? On purpose?" "I don't have proof," Whitaker admitted, "but your father suspected as much. He tried to warn me, but before I could help, it was too late." The room seemed to spin, and Evelyn gripped the arm of her chair for support. Her father's death wasn't an accident. It was murder. And now, the pieces were beginning to fall into place. As she left Whitaker's house that night, Bowie stayed close by her side, his mismatched eyes glowing in the moonlight. Evelyn's mind raced with what she had learned. The fire, the letters, Bowie's peculiar behavior. It was all connected. But how deep did the conspiracy run? And why had Bowie, a stray dog with no apparent ties to her family, been the one to lead her to these revelations? The answers lay ahead, buried beneath layers of snow and lies. Evelyn was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. And Bowie, her silent guardian, would be with her every step of the way. Evelyn's discovery weighed heavily on her mind. Her father hadn't simply died in a tragic accident. He had been silenced, his death orchestrated to cover up a sinister truth. But by whom and why? The rusted tin, Mr. Whitaker's confession, and the haunting letters left too many unanswered questions. Yet one thing was certain: Bowie wasn't just a stray. He was a guide, leading her deeper into a mystery she never imagined she'd face. The following morning, Evelyn woke to find Bowie on the porch again, his mismatched eyes fixed on her. He was restless, pacing and pawing at the snow like he was ready to move. The urgency in his movements sparked something in her. She grabbed her coat and boots, determined to follow him wherever he led. "Where are you taking me this time?" she murmured as they left the familiar streets of Winterhaven. Bowie didn't look back. His focus was singular, his pace relentless. Evelyn hurried after him, her breath puffing in white clouds against the frigid air. The forest loomed again, but this time Bowie didn't linger. He bounded forward with renewed energy, weaving through snow-laden pines. Evelyn struggled to keep up, her boots slipping on patches of ice. Finally, they reached a clearing she hadn't seen before. In its center stood an old, decrepit shed, its roof sagging under the weight of years and snow. Bowie stopped at the threshold, his ears perked and his body tense. Evelyn hesitated before stepping forward, her heart pounding. The shed's wooden door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a dim interior cluttered with broken tools and forgotten relics. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight streaming through the cracks. At first glance, it looked abandoned, but Bowie didn't relax. He sniffed the air, then began pawing at a corner where the floorboards looked uneven. Evelyn knelt beside him, prying at the loose planks with her gloved hands. Beneath them, she found a small compartment. Inside was a weathered leather journal, its edges charred as if it had survived a fire. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was her father's. December 12th. I've uncovered something about the Whitaker Restoration Project. The plans they're submitting to the town don't match the actual blueprints. They're cutting corners, cheap materials, faulty designs. If this continues, someone's going to get hurt. But there's more. I found records of funds being funneled into private accounts. This isn't just negligence, it's theft. December 17th. I spoke to her about what I found. He agrees we need to go to the authorities, but he wants to wait for proof. I'm not sure we have time. The building is already a hazard, and now I've heard whispers about a fire drill being scheduled. Something doesn't sit right with me. Evelyn flipped through the pages, her pulse quickening as she pieced together her father's investigation. He had been digging into the corruption surrounding the Whitaker project, risking his life to protect the town. And the mysterious figure from the letter, had been his confidant. But who was R? A sudden noise startled her, and she turned to see Bowie growling softly. Outside the shed, the crunch of snow under heavy boots reached her ears. Evelyn froze, clutching the journal to her chest. Bowie pressed close to her, his body a shield between her and the unknown visitor. Who's there? Evelyn called, her voice trembling. The figure stepped into the doorway, and Evelyn's breath caught. It was Mr. Whitaker, his expression grave. I thought I might find you here, he said, his tone low. What are you doing here? Evelyn demanded, her grip on the journal tightening. I followed Bowie, he admitted, glancing at the dog. I've been keeping an eye on him ever since the fire. He's not just a stray, you know. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? Whitaker hesitated, then sighed. That dog. He was there the night of the fire. He was part of a rescue team, trained to search for survivors. Your father saved him, pulled him out of the flames before it was too late. But Bowie ran off afterward. I never thought I'd see him again. The revelation left Evelyn stunned. Bowie? He knew my dad? Whitaker nodded. And I think he's been trying to finish what your father started. Evelyn looked down at the journal in her hands. My dad knew about the fraud. He was going to report it. But someone stopped him. Whitaker's face darkened. The man behind it all. It wasn't me, Evelyn. But I knew what was happening, and I didn't do enough to stop it. When your father came to me, I told him to stay quiet. I thought I was protecting him, but instead, I left him vulnerable. Tears stung Evelyn's eyes. Who was it? Who killed my dad? Whitaker hesitated, then said a name that made Evelyn's blood run cold. Stephen Randall. Stephen Randall was one of Winter Haven's most respected figures, a philanthropist who had funded countless town projects, including the restoration that led to the fire. He was a man everyone trusted, a man no one would suspect. But Evelyn now saw him for what he was, a liar, a thief, and a murderer. That night, Evelyn sat in her room, the journal open on her lap. The pages told a story of bravery and betrayal, of her father's unwavering commitment to justice. She felt the weight of his legacy pressing on her, urging her to act. Bowie lay at her feet, his mismatched eyes watching her as if he understood the turmoil in her heart. The next morning, Evelyn made a decision. She couldn't let her father's death go unanswered. She packed the journal and the tin of photos, preparing to confront Randall. But Bowie seemed uneasy, pacing and whining as if sensing danger. It's okay, Evelyn whispered, kneeling to stroke his fur. We'll do this together. She walked to the town hall, where Randall's office overlooked the square. Bowie stayed close, his body tense as they climbed the steps. Evelyn's hands trembled as she knocked on the door. Randall answered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Evelyn Parker, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Evelyn held up the journal. "I know what you did." For a moment, Randall's mask slipped, his eyes narrowing. "I don't know what you're talking about." "My father," Evelyn said, her voice firm despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "He found out about the fraud. And you made sure he couldn't tell anyone." Randall's smile returned, sharper now. "Careful, young lady. Those are serious accusations." Evelyn didn't flinch. "I have proof. And Bowie, he knows the truth too. He's been leading me to it this whole time." Randall's gaze flicked to the dog, his expression darkening. "That much should have stayed buried with your father." Before Evelyn could react, Bowie lunged, his growl reverberating through the office. The sudden chaos startled Randall, giving Evelyn the chance to bolt from the room. Clutching the journal tightly, she ran for the door with Bowie at her heels. The truth was out, but the danger was far from over. As Evelyn fled into the snowy streets, she knew one thing for certain. Her fight wasn't finished. Bowie, her father's unlikely ally, wouldn't stop until justice was served. Evelyn sprinted through the snow-covered streets, her breath coming in ragged puffs. The journal was clutched tightly against her chest, the damning evidence it held her only shield against the shadow of Stephen Randall. Bowie ran beside her, his mismatched eyes flicking between her and the darkness closing in. The weight of her father's legacy pressed heavily on her, but she wasn't running away. She was running toward justice. Winter Haven's streets were eerily quiet, the holiday lights casting faint glimmers on the snow. Evelyn's heart pounded as she reached the safety of her home. She burst through the door, startling her mother, who stood frozen in the kitchen. "Evelyn, what's going on?" Maria asked, her voice trembling. Evelyn thrust the journal onto the counter. "Mom, I know what happened to Dad. He found out about the fraud, about Randall. That fire wasn't an accident. He was killed." Maria's face went pale, her hands gripping the edge of the counter for support. "Evelyn, you don't understand. Randall is dangerous." "I know," Evelyn interrupted. "That's why we need to take this to the police. They can arrest him." Maria shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "You think it's that simple? He's untouchable. He owns this town." "Not anymore," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "I have proof. This journal. It's enough to bring him down." Bowie barked sharply, drawing their attention. He stood by the door, his ears pricked and his body tense. Evelyn's stomach dropped as she noticed a shadow moving across the porch. Someone was outside. "Stay here," she whispered to her mother. She grabbed the journal and crept toward the door, her heart hammering. Bowie stood at her side, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The door burst open before she could reach it. Stephen Randall stepped inside, his towering frame blocking the doorway. His smile was cold, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Evelyn. "You've been busy," he said, his voice as icy as the wind outside. "I should have dealt with this a long time ago." Bowie lunged forward, teeth bared, but Randall raised a heavy boot and kicked him aside. Evelyn screamed as Bowie yelped, his body crumpling against the wall. Fury burned through her as she clutched the journal tighter. "You killed my father," she spat, her voice shaking with anger. "You think you can get away with it, but you're wrong." Randall took a step toward her, his expression darkening. "Your father was a fool. He didn't know when to stop digging. Neither do you." Evelyn backed away, her mind racing. She glanced at Bowie, who was struggling to his feet, his mismatched eyes burning with determination. Despite his injury, he growled low, positioning himself between her and Randall. "You're not going to stop me," Evelyn said, her voice steadier now. "Everyone will know what you did." Randall lunged, but Evelyn darted past him, clutching the journal as she ran out the back door. Bowie followed, limping but unwavering. The icy air bit at her skin as she sprinted toward the only place she knew Randall couldn't follow, the fire station. The fire station loomed ahead, its red doors standing out against the snow. Evelyn's father had spent years here, his second home. It was where he had laughed with his team, where he had prepared for the dangers that ultimately claimed his life. Now, it was the place where she would honor his memory by ensuring the truth came to light. She banged on the doors, her voice cracking as she yelled for help. Within moments, the doors creaked open and Chief Harris, her father's old friend, appeared. His eyes widened as he took in Evelyn's disheveled state and the journal in her hands. "Evelyn? What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "There's no time to explain," she said urgently. "Randall killed my dad. This journal, it proves everything. You need to get this to the police." Harris frowned but took the journal, flipping through its pages. His expression darkened as he read. "These are serious accusations, Evelyn. Are you sure about this?" "Positive," she said, her voice steady. "But we need to act fast. He's after me." As if on cue, a car screeched to a halt outside. Randall stepped out, his face a mask of fury. He carried a crowbar, its menacing glint visible even in the dim light. Evelyn's heart pounded as Harris stepped in front of her, his broad frame shielding her from Randall. "You've gone too far, Stephen," Harris said, his voice firm. "Whatever power you think you have ends now." Randall sneered. "This town doesn't run without me, Harris. You know that. Step aside." Harris didn't budge. Behind him, Bowie growled, his body coiled like a spring despite his limp. Evelyn could feel the tension crackling in the air. Randall swung the crowbar, but Bowie leapt forward, sinking his teeth into Randall's arm. The man screamed, dropping the weapon as Bowie held firm. The commotion drew other firefighters from the station, their faces a mix of shock and determination as they restrained Randall. Evelyn watched, her breath hitching as Bowie finally released his grip and staggered back to her side. The next days passed in a blur. The journal, coupled with testimony from Mr. Whitaker and others, was enough to secure Randall's arrest. The town buzzed with the news, the once respected philanthropist exposed as a fraud and a murderer. Evelyn's father's name was finally cleared, his bravery recognized not just as a firefighter but as a man who had fought for the truth. Christmas morning dawned cold and bright. Evelyn sat by the window, a steaming mug of cocoa in her hands. Bowie lay at her feet, his bandaged leg a reminder of the sacrifices he had made. She reached down to scratch behind his ears, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You're a hero, you know that," she whispered. Bowie wagged his tail, his mismatched eyes meeting hers with a warmth that melted the lingering chill in her soul. Outside, the snow glittered like a blanket of stars. For the first time in a year, Evelyn felt peace. Her father's legacy had been honored, and though the pain of his loss remained, it was no longer tainted by unanswered questions. As the day wore on, Evelyn found herself drawn to the forest once more. She walked the familiar path, Bowie trotting at her side. In the clearing where the old shed stood, she paused, her breath misting in the cold air. Bowie sniffed the ground, then looked up at her, his tail wagging softly. Evelyn knelt beside him, pulling him close. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." That night, as snow fell gently over Winter Haven, Evelyn hung a new ornament on their Christmas tree. A small silver paw print engraved with the words, "Forever a Hero." Bowie lay beneath the tree, his mismatched eyes glowing in the light of the twinkling bulbs. And for the first time, Evelyn truly believed in miracles. Thank you very much for watching the video to the end. If you were moved by the story of the canine hero and the spirit of Christmas that transformed lives, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments what you thought of this exciting journey.